What's up, y'all? It's T-Tart. Today we're going to be looking at more Scarlet and Violet theories, but first, the question has always been around, when are we going to get more DLC news? So let's parallel this to Sword and Shield's DLC hype season. So Sword and Shield's DLC was actually announced in January because they were a bit on time back then, and the first trailer came out in March. Then they waited till June to release a trailer just before the Isle of Armor came out, and then September to release the last trailer just before the Crown Tundra came out. So that's 4 real trailers. Now, to parallel that to Scarlet and Violet, they were a bit behind, probably because they were fixing up the bugs and all. So the January-March trailer kind of combined into what the February trailer we got was. So that just leaves 2 more trailers, and those would just be just before the Teal Mask and Indigo disc come out. And that's enough of that. Let's look at some of your theories. Alright, so first off, we got Natsu. So they brought up an interesting point of how the academies are written in Japanese. We have Orange Academy for Naranja, Grape Academy for Uva, even Apple Academy for Manzana for that one part of the game. But when talking about Blueberry Academy, they write Blueberry and then the kanji for Academy or Institute Campus. Then they went on to look at the 4 names again in a different language, Italian, and it's the same situation. For Orange, Grape, and Apple, it's shown as an academy, but for Blueberry, it's an institute, which is a small detail, but it seems pretty intentional by them. I mean, you don't accidentally call it something else. And an institute kind of implies it's like an organization or where something is actually being done there. So this is really cool because back on the T-Tart podcast, we were talking about a cool idea about what Blueberry Academy might be up to. The idea is something like this. In Blueberry Academy, they've either figured out something with Terapagos or the same thing that Sarantoro did and have learned to use the crystals to the point where they've also pulled out Paradox Pokemon, and that if you somehow snuck into the wrong parts of Blueberry Academy, that you would just see a bunch of Paradox Pokemon in cells, very similar to Aether Foundation. The theory goes deeper than that, but I'll make probably a full video for that. But when Blueberry is called an institute, it looks like they have a purpose. They're figuring something out there, and it fits that kind of narrative, versus the other ones being just academies where the main purpose is to learn. Sister school my ass. Alright, next up we got Nagito Fries. Now he talks about a pretty cool idea, which is, what if there's a different way to look at Heat's picture? What if this image is actually Terapagos hatching out of a shell? We move over here. So what if this part here is an egg that Terapagos is just crawling out of? This would lead to a whole other narrative for Terapagos, like someone clearly must have laid the egg here, maybe an egg left behind by the ancient Paldean people that they were protecting, but then around 200 years ago, Heath actually does something that triggers it to hatch, and he draws the quick vision he got. Then we move on to the current day, where Sada and Tora have also discovered this roaming turtle deep in Area 0 since Heath made it hatch, and so they use its crystals to make all these inventions. And I say this because there is something quite interesting about the crystals in this game. It kind of fits the timeline that we know about Paldea. Let's say Heath hatched the egg unintentionally, now Terapagos is roaming Area 0. It is known in-game that it was 140 years ago that terrestrialized Pokemon first started appearing. So it's almost like Heath triggered something and that Paldea was normal until Heath did something and caused the egg to hatch. God, I can't wait for this DLC to come out. It's gonna be so cool to have all these answers. Alright, next up we got E38. So they have a theory trying to connect this game to Pokemon Legends Arceus. And it has to do with Blueberry Academy, and then also the idea that it could be near Unova. And their idea is, what if Ingo shows up in this DLC, and by the end of the DLC, he uses a time machine and is sent in the past, or someone forces that upon him. And so that's how you get, in Legends Arceus, Ingo somehow being in the past. Like, for example, let's say in the second DLC, you find Ingo and Emmett, let's say both of them, and they're just visiting. But then you get to, by the end of the DLC, maybe you, Nemona, Ingo, and Emmett, you split into 2 groups. So Nemona, Emmett, you, and Ingo. And when you go down and deal with the time machine stuff, that something happens, goes wrong, and Ingo disappears. I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't think Game Freak really cares to solve some of their plot points. But to be honest, the Game Freak is on a new wave now, so how crazy would it be if they actually give us the backstory? Especially if you also get to see Emmett there too. It'd be a pretty sad story still. Another weird thing about this is Blueberry Academy, if they have their own time machine, must have made a time machine that does both past and future stuff. Because, if you're playing Violet, humans can't go to the past. Yo, what if they send Ingo 200 years to the past, or like 150 whenever Legends takes place, and then Emmett goes 150 years to the future? Why? I don't know. Just to parallel them. Yo, we have a bunch of crackpot theories this video. Alright, next up we got galaxies. And they've got a theory that also talks about Terapagos, but in an evil light. They're saying, what if the drawing in Heat's notebook is Terapagos' second form consuming the region? Which could either be a flash in the past, like something that happened a long time ago that Heat saw a vision of, or Heat seeing a vision of the future of Terapagos about to do it again. And they see something pretty interesting. The crystals in the crater are destructive and consume the things around them, which is very true. Whenever you go to Area Zero and talk around, it's described as the crystals just breaking through buildings. Earlier in the crater, you see that it looks like the trees are feeding off them, so that they're like a giving energy maybe. But then you go to the very bottom and they're starting to act destructive. There's like a crystal that's consumed a whole building. So if you look at Terapagos as being evil and eventually consuming the whole world in crystals and making it its own, it kind of works. You can interpret the hexagons at the bottom of the disc or orb as the Terra crystals consuming Paldea through the crater from the inside out. Okay, that's a weird image to see, but it actually checks out. It's almost like you got Terapagos at the top and then the orb at the bottom, right? It's almost like Terapagos is slowly trying to terrestrialize the entire world. And that's just what it's done so far. And Heat is seeing a vision of how evil Terapagos is. But how could it be, Heat, that it's only after he went to Area Zero that he started roaming? The crystals also consume Pokemon naturally, not just via the Terra Orb. This is what I was saying. 140 years ago, suddenly terrestrialized Pokemon started appearing. It's like Terapagos' influence is only growing ever since whatever Heath did 200 years ago. When I first saw Terapagos, my thoughts were that it looked like it was playing cute and innocent, but that Terapagos is actually manipulative and a liar, and that the only way it can make impactful change is through people and their actions. God, could you really be like this little turtle? Well, we know someone fed them equations, which is still the weirdest thing in this game. Like, of all the things Terapagos could have given Heath, like a treasure map would have made more sense. Something natural that I wanted Heat to find would have made more sense than scientific equations. I think Paldea being consumed is a direct result of Heat opening the box. Okay, so he's referencing the theory video I made last week about Uranoshimako, where the fisherman finds a 5-colored turtle with the flowing tail that also eventually causes him to time travel. You gotta watch that video for this to make sense, but he's saying that maybe the box in that story, what if Paldea being consumed is a direct result of Heat opening the box? Which is pretty much the same thing that we were talking about earlier, where Heat causes the egg to hatch. So Heat did something 200 years ago. It would make sense. Imagine if Terapagos was sealed at the bottom of Area Zero, and once Heat got close enough to the bottom that he was almost lured by Terapagos like a zombie, and he tricked Heath into opening the box that had him sealed. It's very possible, since the code name of the region in this game is Atlantis, that Terapagos is from the time period of wherever Atlantis was, and that when Atlantis fell in one day, that it was Terapagos that consumed it and caused that to happen. And now here we go, Terapagos is out of the box again, and he's about to do the same thing to Paldea. Alright, I'm gonna exit out. So there is a proper theory about Terapagos that I want to make a video on, and so we'll do that next time, but y'all let me know your thoughts. He clearly did something 200 years ago that let the cat out of the bag. Is Terapagos hatching out of an egg? And is Terapagos an evil Pokemon that's actually trying to consume Paldea and crystals? Maybe once it gets enough consumed that it can revert or evolve into a new form. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.